Today we're going to talk about the 5 biggest mistakes that I see moms make as they work on navigating their way on the path from surviving to thriving. There's 5 different phases along this path, and it can be lovely to want to go from surviving and skip the middle 3 and land at thriving, but the reality is we have to work through them. And as I've worked with moms over the last almost 4 years, as they've learned to navigate this path, there's just some pretty common errors. I've made every single one of them, so we're in good company here. But today I'm going to share them with you so that you can become aware of them and overcome them yourself and make your journey from surviving to thriving in motherhood a little bit easier.
Hi, I'm Jessica Jackson, and this is the new way to thrive in motherhood by leaning into who you are, what you love, your unique family situation and personal mission to create a life that you actually want to live. I want to invite you to join me in saying no to the life of the exhausted supermom, burnout, victim thinking, being pulled in so many directions, suffering through survival mode, or being lost in motherhood, and say yes to building strong families and moving forward on our greatest goals in order to create a fulfilling life that we are excited to wake up to each day and become a soaring mother. This is the Thriving in Motherhood podcast.
Today I want to invite you to get the free checklist that I created, the 5-step path from surviving to thriving. It will enable and empower you to figure out where you are and what you can do with where you're at along the path, which of the 5 stages you're in. My heart for you on this is that it'll just make your life a little bit easier. I want you to have a better day today than you had yesterday, and I want tomorrow to be a little bit better too. So go check that out at thrivinginmotherhoodpodcast.com/checklist. All right, let's jump into the mistakes that I see moms making, that I have made as they work on not just surviving through their days, but actually want to thrive. So mistake number 1 is focusing on things in your circle of concern versus your circle of influence. So years ago when I was pregnant with, I think my 3rd baby, I was really, really struggling. I mean, I was miserable. I was physically miserable, like very sick. I couldn't walk, like just really hard pregnancy. And I had 2 little, toddlers and little kids with me in this journey of morning sickness and hard pregnancies. And then my husband was really busy and we didn't have any support around us, like family wise, but we did have some good friends. And so I was out at the playground one day, and one of my friends, as I was complaining to her and telling her all of these hard things that were going on, which were true, she said, well, that's all in your circle of concern. What's in your circle of influence? And then she walked away, and I pulled out a plate, I had a paper plate right there. And I drew 2 circles, and I listed out all these things in my circle of concern. Things that I cared about, things I worried about, things that were impacting me, but I really didn't have any influence or control over. And then I wrote down the things in my circle of influence. And at that time it was, I could eat, I could smile, and I couldn't think of anything else at the time because I was, again, very sick. It was just a trying time. And when she came back, she looked at my plate and she said, don't worry, it'll get bigger. You'll think of more things. And that circle of influence, the more you focus on it. And that's a principle that comes from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. But she was right, and it was true. And I have learned that in these hard seasons, I really do need to focus and get clear about what's in my circle of concern versus in my circle of influence. And it's something that I physically write out. I take time to evaluate it. And it doesn't have to be crazy and elaborate. I did on a paper plate the first time. But when you can be aware of that, then those things on the circle of concern, you can let them go. You can let them be. You can turn them over to God. You can pray about them. But you don't have to carry them, obsess about them, talk about them, ruminate about them. And instead, you can put all of that good energy into things in your circle of influence, the things you actually do have some control over. So that is mistake number 1, focusing on circle of concern instead of circle of influence. We're going to swap that around, focus on the circle of influence. Make a list. Okay, mistake number 2 that I see, scrolling on our phones. Okay, again, I have done this. You have done this. There's no shame in it, but we do need to be aware of what it's doing to us, okay? When we are overwhelmed anywhere along this path, when we are surviving because things are so hard and we're just trying to escape our life, or we're hiding from all the things that need to happen, or we're just not loving how bumpy it is as we're trying to set up routines and systems and declutter the house with our children. Okay, whatever the thing is that you are struggling with right now that we're turning to our phones for, it does 2 things. It destroys 2 of our greatest assets. 1, your brain, your ability to think clearly, to be able to solve your own problems, to be able to make observations and think and figure out how to make it better. Your brain's incredible and it's amazing, and it doesn't need the invented problems that are going to pop up on the internet when you're scrolling and the invented solutions for those invented problems. It needs you to face your own problems and come up with your own solutions, okay? The other thing is it makes noise and cuts off your ability to hear and communicate with God. Now, not completely, right? But if you're scrolling, you're not praying, you're not seeking revelation or wisdom or direction from God. Now, I feel like, all of us has a very unique relationship with God or spirituality or how we look at that. But for me, I know that those times when I fill all of the space with scrolling, I am not connecting with God effectively. And things are just a little bit harder because of it. So that, I would say, are the two reasons why. Like, when I get my phone usage under control, and I did an episode a few weeks ago about that you can go check out if you haven't seen it yet. But that, like, once I get it under control, it's like a whole new world, and my ability to cope gets better. My ability to handle my kids improves. My ability to connect with my children, which solves so many behavioral problems, it's just easier. It just happens naturally by having not a phone around. Okay, so there you go. Mistake number 2, scrolling instead of just facing the problems in front of you. Number 3 problem that I see when we're on this path from surviving to thriving is getting stuck in different phases. Oftentimes we don't realize it's time to move on to the next phase along the path. And so because of that, we are stuck, and there's new problems that arise when you don't move on and you don't start working towards that next stepping stone. So for survival phase, when you are in survival mode, you're really just focusing on existing. You're just getting through the day. You're making sure people are fed. Maybe that they've slept. Maybe that you've slept. But other than that, it's kind of like you're either just existing because things are so, like, you're emotionally, mentally, physically wiped out and unable to do much more than that. Or it's like packed to the brim, right? Like every moment is scheduled and there's so much going on and there's no room to breathe. But you're also not doing the regular things, right? There are extra things going on. And in either case, again, it's like, have people been fed? Did we sleep? Okay, moving on, right? And when you get stuck in that, it doesn't, like, life gets really emotionally dead inside when you just stay there longer than you need to. And a lot of times you can't control how long you can stay there, but like you need to learn some new skills, some new strategies to be able to get out of there and move on to the next phase, which is number 2, reentry. Now, one of the tricky things about reentry that can get you stuck here and even stuck in this survival mode reentry loop is when you look at everything as a project that needs to be done one time. So when you go into reentry from survival mode, it's really exciting because now you're going to start catching up on all of the things that you have been doing. Your dishes, your laundry, your exercise, taking care of yourself, getting dressed, taking showers, depending on what you're in survival mode for, it could be these basic things. And so when you're doing it, I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to do my laundry today. Check, laundry's done. Moving on. What's next, right? Oh, I'm going to make meals. Great. Check. People are fed, and I'm going to do the dishes. Great, dishes are done. But the problem is the next day or the next week, all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, there's laundry again? Wait a minute, we have to clean the kitchen again? Like, it's a fire, it's an emergency, right? We ran out of clothes, things are dirty. And so instead of just anticipating and expecting there to be a routine, instead you're just stuck in the cycle of, oh, I'm surprised again that we need something, and it's really hard. Now, it's also hard to move into normalizing, right? Like, that's a new set of challenges to create some of these systems and routines so that things aren't a surprise every day, every week, every couple hours, with feeding people. But it seems like some people are just more wired. Like, for me, it's way easier to think of things as a project one and done. And it takes a decent amount of startup for me to start thinking of it as, okay, I'm going to do this over and over again. How great, So, but you can get stuck. And when you get stuck there, it's just exhausting. It wears you out to constantly be in that state of stress because things just break down in the whole family system when clothes aren't available, when food's not available, when bathrooms are disgusting, right? It's just exhausting. Okay, normalizing. You can get stuck in normalizing when you're so focused on the house that you're not making space for things that you enjoy. And it can feel like you are lost in motherhood, right? We hear this all the time, getting lost in motherhood. It's probably because you got stuck in normalizing because you didn't move on to the next phase, which is exploring. Now, exploring is a fun phase because you're starting to ask this question of what do you want more of? What do you love doing? What do you want to experience? What do you want to try? What are you curious about? What types of things do you want to bring into your family culture? It's a really fun phase. But you can get stuck at exploring too, because you're either spinning your wheels, you're not taking action, you're not actually trying things, or you start taking on so much in the exploring that you lose any traction you had in normalizing and you end up back down in survival mode again. And it's not really fun to step out of that because all of a sudden now you're committed to doing all these fun things and trying all these new things. And so life gets kind of out of balance there. So you can kind of get stuck in that exploring mode and lose the traction. And then thriving, we can have some other stuck points here because this phase of thriving is really where you start to customize your life. The first 4 phases, they're pretty you have to do them. You just go through these phases. But thriving is really fun because this is where you've taken all of the research that you've already done about what kind of life you want to create and exploring and the things that you enjoy, the type of family culture you want to create. And you're now starting to put it into practice by creating a vision, by creating systems that support the things you want to do, the things you care about. It's just a lot more customized and it's really, really fun. But you can get paralyzed in wanting things to be perfect and not being able to take action or getting stuck in the mom guilt of trying to do something else besides take care of your house. That also comes up in exploring as well. You might not be sure how to set effective goals and really struggle with planning on how to do it all. And so it can start to feel a little bit like you're surviving again, or a lot like you're surviving again, when you feel like, man, I should be able to do these things and I can't figure out how to put all the pieces in place. And you can kind of give up. You might slide back. You might let go of some routines and habits to end up feel like you're surviving again. Okay, so getting stuck in any of those phases is a mistake. It's a problem. So what's the alternative here? As soon as you start to feel the desires in survival mode to get order, that's probably a sign you're hitting reentry. And if you can just focus on reentry, know it's going to be intense, but plow through it, get caught up, and then normalizing, you're going to switch into, okay, let's get the basics under control. And then once the basics are under control, I'm not going to wait for things to be perfect. I'm going to move on to exploring. I'm going to start figuring out what do we want to do with more things in our lives. What do we enjoy? What brings me joy? What helps us feel happy and calm and reset and recharged? And once I know that, I'm going to spiral that into creating a vision. And I'm going to work on the system, putting these systems in place to make the vision a reality. Things that we talk about here all the time, doing a monthly review and a quarterly review and planning out your weeks, not your days, these types of things that you can learn more about at the free training plan a week you can win at thrivingamotherhoodpodcast.com/more-time. Okay. All of those things you do in the thriving phase to help you move forward. Okay. The next mistake that I see us making on this path from surviving to thriving is focusing on the suffering and how hard it is instead of what you're learning or what this is doing for you and your ability to grow and change and become something more or better. Okay. I've heard it described as what is this doing for me instead of what is this doing to me. But this is a really helpful thing to help you become more resilient, to help add meaning to the hard things in your life, and also can help you teach others and help others who are also going through this thing that you have gone through or are going through. Now, you can't necessarily rush this. We do have to go through the grief process, right? When things are hard, it might not be what you want to do in the moment to process and see, what am I learning from this? But it was a skill set. So the first time I had something really, really hard to happen to me, I was in high school. I had a cyst in my heel. There was no bone in it. It was just gel. And so it came to the point where if my foot broke, which it was about to do, then there wasn't enough bone there to reconstruct a foot. I wouldn't have a foot anymore. And so I had this surgery. They tapped on it to figure out where to drill. Fortunately, after I was asleep under anesthesia, and my bone cracked. So we could not have waited another day to get this done. But I spent many months in a wheelchair, many months with crutches, and it was a very long and slow and one of the most painful experiences I've ever had in my life. And I was so angry during that entire process, so angry. And from that time in my life, I realized that's not how I want to experience things. Now, the next time I had something hard happen to me, I did it a little bit better, but not great. Okay. And so every time something has happened, it has been, an opportunity for my emotional resilience and my muscles to get stronger. And I typically do it really badly first. And it takes me a long time to get to the point where I can think about lessons learned. But at this point, and I'm not saying there aren't going to be surprises along the way, but at this point, when some hard things have happened, I've been able to get to this, what lessons am I learning, a lot quicker. And in part because I've been using the Thriving in Motherhood journal. Like, that's built into the journal, and I use it when things are hard. And so it helps me look for those things. It helps me look for the lessons, help me look for the good things. So that is a really important mistake thing to do instead of making a mistake when you are working on your way from those 5 steps, because it's really, really hard and there's going to be opposition. It's going to take a lot of effort to move yourself along that path. I know, I've done it so many times, and it's hard. It takes effort, but it can be done. And the beautiful thing is you are going to learn and grow and become something amazing along the way. It's not just about getting to a destination. It is definitely about who you're becoming in the process. All right. The last mistake that I see moms make along this path is to think that there's only a few things that they can do to make their life easier. And here are the ones that I see all the time. Send your kids to grandma's house and eat out. If you can't send your kids to grandma's house or buy dinner, then it's like, well, I don't know. This is going to be really hard. What are we going to do? And I saw other moms using that as a solution as a young mom when we had, 3 little kids, 4 and under. We were in grad school. We didn't have money to eat out, and we've never lived by grandparents. So we've never been able to have like grandparents' day every Thursday, or, hey, things are really hard. Can you take the kids for a little bit? Or, hey, can you come over and help me? Like, that has never been part of our story. And so I've spent years playing victim and having a pity party because we had no way to make our life easier. Some of those conveniences. It turns out there are way more things that we can do to make things go better on every phase along the path. Even if you can't have help from grandparents, even if you don't have money to buy food and you still have to make it, and you have to make it cheaply and cleverly, there's still lots that you can do. And this is where the Surviving to Thriving toolkit has come in to play. So I've spent months creating this program to help you have way more than 2 things that you can pull out on a bad day or on a hard day, on every single one of the challenging things that come along on that path from surviving to thriving, whether you're in survival mode, re-entry, normalizing, exploring, or thriving. There are different tools that you can pull out that you can use to make today better and to make tomorrow better too. So just get through today a little more gracefully than you would have without them. So you can learn all about that at thrivinginmotherhoodpodcast.com/toolkit. I'm not exactly sure when it's coming out. I'm recording these videos before we go on a massive month-long 5-week road trip out west and back again. So you're getting these videos way after I'm recording them, but it's coming. It's going to be amazing. Might already be available. You can just go check thrivinginmotherhoodpodcast.com/toolkit to be able to see what other options there are, because there are so many. And there are so many things that you can do that are in your circle of influence, to tie it all the way back to the beginning. There are so many things that you can do in your circle of influence to make your life better. We do not have to be victims. Even when things are so hard, there are options. And I would love to know in the comments, which one of these mistakes have you been making? Remember, I've made them all. And which one you're going to work on to make things a little bit better in your own life. And I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you next week.
Where you are planted, watch the blossoms grow.